Hi, everybody. This is Kathleen from A Great Good Place for Books, and I really want to welcome you to a really special evening. I know you guys know that here at GGP, one of our favorite things to do is to really celebrate our local authors. And tonight, I am super excited to introduce Monica West, the author of this amazing new book, Revival Season. And she's going to be in conversation with one of Mike's favorite books of the season, Dawnie Walton, who wrote the final revival of Oprah and Nev. This is really exciting to me. These two amazing writers, they met at the Iowa Writers Workshop. And for those of you who don't know, that's one of the premier writing schools in America. And you have to be pretty amazingly talented to be there. And so I really want to welcome you all to Great Good Place for Books. Everybody, let's give them a big hand.
Monica. Look at this beauty. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a really, I mean, you know what this feels like, but it's to hold your whole thing in your hands is a pretty stunning moment. So I'm excited to finally have it as a thing. Yeah.
It happened, and we're already getting a yay, Miss West. Yay. I know a lot of your students are in the audience and probably a lot of our classmates as well.
Yeah.
I want to thank Kathleen and Michael for having us. I'm so honored to be doing your launch event because I know what a special day this is. And we were talking earlier in the green room and you were so modest about it. But what I wanted to ask you really was that Times review, like when you read it.
The Times review.
It was amazing. Congratulations.
Oh, so incredible. Such a great way to wake up this morning to kind of have that pop up for me. So I'm still kind of on cloud nine from that.
Well, every bit of it is deserved. And as a treat to the audience, we would love if you would read a bit from Revival Season.
Absolutely. So the section I'm going to read from Revival Season, the story is a 15-year-old narrator named Miriam Horton. She's the oldest daughter of a faith healer and a revival preacher. And there's one summer where she witnesses something that changes her whole view, both of her father and her family and her faith. And the section I'm going to read, Miriam and her mom have a really close relationship, and they're confidants in some ways. And so I'm going to read this one section where Miriam, but then there are ways that she starts to see her mother as a person. So one of my favorite sections to write was this one section where Miriam, something has just happened where her father has been found out to maybe not be able to do this healing thing that he says he can. Miriam believes that she can, and she goes downstairs and hears her mom dancing. So here's her mom music, and then he sees her mom dancing. So I'm gonna read from this scene, about 2/3 the way through the book, with Miriam and her mother in the kitchen. In bed in the middle of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about how my hands had touched something and made it whole again. But then my thoughts were interrupted by music that wasn't gospel, riding the heat current through the vent beneath my bed. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but the music continued even after I got up and crept downstairs, passing the front window where I saw an empty driveway. Papa had been leaving early a lot more these days, staying gone for hours at a time and offering no explanation about where he'd been when he returned. I imagined long, closed-door meetings with the deacon board as he tried to replace Deacon Johnson, meetings that were too volatile for him to let us overhear. When I got closer to the kitchen, the music slid into my veins. The hi-hat's tinny tapping was persistent as guitars and drums faded, leaving nothing but a woman's mournful voice singing about a man who left her, her high notes breaking away from the music and modulating until they landed on a sound more animal than human. A pair of feet patted a syncopated rhythm in the kitchen's dimness, quick steps that were out of pace with the slow words and music. When I craned my neck around the corner, all of the weight of Ma's growing body was raised on the balls of her feet. Her eyes were closed, and her right arm was bent several inches in front of her, as though she were holding someone who wasn't there. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her, unencumbered by the heaviness of pregnancy and revival season that had stooped her shoulders. I watched her reflection as she passed the black mirrored pools of the kitchen windows. My eyes slid to her undulating hips that drove her from the cabinets to the stove, buffeting her against the refrigerator and back toward the sink, her face tilted upward. Her limbs threaded together in front of her, swimming their way to the light. Carnal, Papa probably would have muttered if he had been here. But this wasn't the evil of the flesh that he said was sin. For a moment, I saw the dancer that she had been before she met Papa. I leaned against the door jamb, my shoulder touching the wall. I couldn't shift my eyes from her, from the smile that tickled the sides of her mouth as her lip formed words to lyrics that I had never heard her say. I'll be your lover, better than any other. I'll make you moan and scream with ecstasy. Her lips should have stumbled over those words, but there was only unfettered joy behind her closed, fluttering eyelids as her languid limbs moved like they were floating underwater. I wondered how many nights she went downstairs while we slept, a thin floor the only thing separating us. The song ended and her eyes opened and focused on me as the opening chords to a new song filled the room. Her mouth widened in shock, and she wrapped her hands around her nightgown as though she were naked. Did I wake you up? She transformed in front of me, jamming the screen of her phone until the room was quiet. Her scared eyes darted as her neck craned around me. He's not here. Her shoulders relaxed, and she collapsed in the kitchen chair. All the vibrancy in her face and body slowly left the room. I took the chair across from her. I've never seen you dance like that, Mom. She shrugged. Can you teach me? A sparkle in the corner of her normally dimmed eyes provided a glimmer of the Ma I'd just seen. She pressed both hands against the table and turned toward the door once more. When she got to her feet, she stretched out her hand toward me. When I grabbed it, and she pulled me to a standing position. Soon we were in the middle of the kitchen floor. Her phone began another song with a quicker beat, like the rat-a-tat-tat of sudden rain against a windowsill. She crooked her arm around the small of my back and pressed me against the hard, protruding mound of her stomach, flattening her breasts against mine as she collapsed the gap between us with one swift jerk of her arm. Our bodies moved as one, her hips rocking a couple seconds before mine caught up. My clumsy body was off kilter as it rammed into hers, bouncing us off each other and sending me away from her in a twirl. When I stopped spinning and found her again, she was extending her arm across the kitchen toward me. She spun me again, all while singing along to the lyrics. We danced until that song ended, and then through another few songs until I lost count. By the time the sun burned the sky orange, we fell to the floor breathless, spread eagle beside one another. My laugh intertwined with hers until they were inextricable from each other, and her chest heaved and fell in rapid succession. I'd heard her laugh before, at Caleb's dumb jokes over dinner, or Papa's impressions of church members, but this laugh was different. It was bright and bold, the first real laugh since what had happened with Papa the night after Micah's healing service. I looked over next to me at where she lay with eyes closed and hair splayed against the floor like a sunburst. You're pretty good, she said to the ceiling when her breathing returned to normal. You're not so bad yourself. It's all the contemporary classes I took in high school before things got bad. She rolled over on her side and perched her chin in her palm. Her laughing eyes became mournful as they searched mine. She reached out and placed a palm on the side of my face, her fingertips grazing my cheekbone that was prominent like hers, our twin faces in different bodies, she liked to say. I kept saying that I couldn't marry a man like my father, and your dad was different in the early years, but I feel like I don't know him anymore, and I've been meaning to say that I'm sorry. Sorry for what? I asked. The front door clicked. We sprang from where we were sprawled on the floor. Ma opened cupboards, clanging pots and pans together, an elaborate charade of making breakfast, as I pressed the pause button on her phone and shoved it in the pocket of my robe. Papa's loud footsteps came down the hallway, and Ma's trembling hands made the heavy cast iron skillet handle rattle against the burner. As he stopped at the edge of the kitchen, I folded and refolded a dish towel into sections, watching the thread loops line up like a row of tiny nooses. I sidestepped to the edge of the kitchen until my spine flattened against the refrigerator door. Ma greeted him with a tentative embrace, her face seemingly trying to gauge how long he had been waiting on the porch, what he had heard. His arms relaxed by his sides, even as Ma hugged him hello. You're back early. Do you want some breakfast? I'm starving. With Papa's focus on Ma, I slowly crept upstairs. Back in my room, I sank into my bed, feeling some comfort that I wasn't the only one with twin selves. Ma didn't heal, but she kept a whole other side shielded from Papa. I would have to follow her example and separate my selves as well. When alone, I would drape my power around my shoulders like a cape, but before leaving the sanctum of my room, I would have to revert to the Miriam I had learned how to be, the Miriam who held her tongue and stayed quiet the way Papa expected.
Oh, beautiful, Monica. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad you chose to read that section, because the relationship between Miriam and her mother, I thought, was one of the most beautiful aspects of the book. And I really do want to get into sort of a character by character bit of this conversation. But before we start, I want to remind the audience that there will be a question period at the end of this, and you can put your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat. Kathleen will be coming back to help us with that part. So I want to talk about, we met in graduate school. We met at Iowa, and I think we felt kind of instantly bonded, or at least I felt bonded to you, because we were kind of older in the program. We had both experienced some life, and that's something I'm actually very proud of. And I think that you should be too. And I kind of want to talk about the journey for you to becoming an author, because it is quite a journey. It is like lots of twists and turns and things like that. So yeah, what has it been to get to that moment?
Yeah, I think you and I have really similar trajectories, different actual kind of journeys, but I've been writing forever, even before I actually went to Iowa. So the idea of getting into Iowa and going to Iowa was the realization of something I'd wanted for a really, really long time, but just hadn't, the things hadn't aligned to make that happen. So I've been writing. The Revival Season is my second book that but I've written a book before that I wrote starting in 2002 and spent 10 years on it. And it may never see the light of day because it's not any good. But I just wrote, and I always found time to write, and I always went to readings, and I loved that life, but I just didn't think it was mine. And then I grew up in a house where things are practical. You get a job. Like writing wasn't, you can do a job and then you write on the side. And so writing was always an on the side thing that I did. So I've written forever. And when I got into Iowa, it was the first kind of recognition that maybe this is something that I can do, and maybe it's something that I can do well. And I had written I started Revival season in 2012. So by the time I got to Iowa, it was about 85% of the way done. And then getting there and workshopping it made it completely different, and it's even become different since then. But people always see the end of a journey of kind of publishing a book as something, it's a brief snippet in time. I've been writing for a very long time before even going to Iowa, and then before even publishing this book. So, and I've been teaching for a long time, and I worked in publishing for a little while, and so I've had all these different lives. But the one common thread, even between all the different jobs I took and the things I did, was that I wrote, usually at night or on the weekends or in the mornings. And now it's something I can do more, which is lovely.
Wow, you're a novelist.
I'm a novelist. Officially.
So we never really talked about what Revival Season is about. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this already know, but I love to hear from the author in her own words how you would describe this book, and and what was the spark for it.
Yeah, so Revival Season is the story of a 15-year-old girl. Her name is Miriam Horton. She's the oldest daughter in this religious family of revivalists. Her dad is a faith healer and a revival preacher. And over the course of a summer, the family gets in their old minivan and they kind of go across the country in the South. And the father conducts these tent revivals where he heals people and he preaches. And so over the course of this one summer, there's something that happened the previous summer. I'm trying to not give too much away. I'm trying to be general with my summary. Over the course of a previous summer, she sees something about her dad that unsettles her, but is not quite sure what it is and what it's all about. And then this new summer comes up and there's a lot of anxiety in Miriam because she knows kind of what she's seen. She's really concerned, but she wants to believe that her father's a good person. She wants to believe that he's the person that she thought he was. And then she witnesses something that she kind of can't unsee, and that just fundamentally shakes all the things that she's known to be true. So she questions her faith, and she questions her family, she questions her father, and she questions everything that she's ever learned as right. And then so over the course, they come back to Texas, is where the family's from. Over the course of the following year, that doubt kind of starts to grow. And then Miriam realizes that she has something that, like a secret that she's been told that she can't do and she can't be because she's female, and she has to figure out what that is, and to step into that power that could fundamentally change her life, or it could separate her from her family. And she has to kind of really navigate that tightrope between being a dutiful daughter and then stepping into something that she believes that she can do. So that's what the book is about. And it came to me. So the book came to me with an image of, and it's actually an image that's right in the beginning of the book, is that I saw this image of a van kind of speeding along the highway in my head, and I kept seeing it. And when I see things over and over again, I have to write my way through them. And that's how this book started. I said, I kept seeing this van. So who's in the van? Where are they going? What's going on? What's the story here? And for me, once I thought about, I wanted the van to be a place where people spend a lot of time. It was more than just a mode of transportation. It was kind of where they live, and they're clustered together, and you can't get away from other people. You can't get away from the people that you have disagreements with. And then I like the idea of, in this claustrophobic space, placing someone with a ton of power and someone with the least in the family, and then making them kind of be in close proximity. And then once I had that image and I knew that that's what I wanted to write about, then I backfilled it to be about, I said, okay, what's the power that the father has? What's the thing that he wants? And then I was thinking about what would it be if I wrote this book about religion, which is such a taboo topic to write about, but I just felt like I wanted to, because it's a question that is always kind of something that's been front of mind for me for a long time. What does it mean to have agency in an institution that tells you that you don't because you're female? And so I was thinking a lot through that. And then that's kind of where I backfilled the idea of religion onto this image of the van. And then that's where the revival season came from. So yeah.
I want to go back for a second to a word that you used that I thought was really apt. And that word is claustrophobic, because this book is so close up and intimate within this family. And yet you're also able to create entire worlds within the dynamics of this family. So I want to talk about who is in that family, who's in that claustrophobic family. I found your characters, each one of them, to be so interesting. And so what I want to do is kind of go through each one and have you speak about that character and what you hope the reader takes away from that character.
Such a great question.
Go along. So let's start with our heroine, Miriam, who is, I believe, 15 at the start of the novel. And I was curious as to why that age? How did you settle on the age of 15 for her?
So Miriam initially was 13. And then my amazing editor, Karina Griederman, said, I think that she should be older. Then I thought, and then like the age of 15 came up, and she talked about some of the wisdom in Miriam's voice. And so I made her older. But the other part about being 15 is that I had been a high school teacher for a very long portion of my life. And so I spend long amounts of time with people who are that age every single day. And I've done it for years and years. So there's something about discovery and figuring out who you are as a person, separating yourself from your parents, deciding what you believe and what you don't believe, even if that goes against what your parents kind of have told you your whole time. So there's this profound differentiation of self and family and self and other that I think happens right around when you turn kind of 14 and 15, and then just kind of extends into when you really come into yourself kind of in the later high school years. And so 15 then felt like the right age for Miriam, because this summer, when she sees all these things about her family, she's all of a sudden forced to see them with entirely new eyes. And so the things that she's seen about her father, she has to see him differently, and he forces her to. She sees her mom differently, and then kind of this whole structure that she's grown up with, she's really critical of for the, not quite the first time in her life, but the first time that she kind of discovers that she can have the agency to act on it. So that's how Miriam kind of is and came to be 15. And that's why 15, I think, once Karina suggested it, 15 felt like a really great age for her.
And her emotional journey from the beginning of the novel to the end is just amazing. And
thank you. Yeah, she just kind of comes into herself and decides what she wants. And even if what she wants is separate from what her parents, or her father in particular, what he wants for her.
Right. Let's talk about the matriarch of the family, who you wrote about so beautifully, those sort of naughty lyrics as she's dancing to herself in the kitchen. What is Joanne like? And what was interesting to you about writing that character?
Yeah. Joanne is the one in the family who has had the most, she's the one who's had it, well, Samuel did as well, the father, but Joanne had a secular life before she met him. And so she's the kind of slice of this family that you can get a sense that she has straddled two worlds between what it was like for her before she kind of grew up in faith. The three children, and then the fourth later on, they've grown up in this their whole lives, so they don't know anything different. Joanne has a family, she has siblings, and she has parents that she doesn't see anymore. And for Joanne, what was interesting to me was that, and one of the things I tried to touch on in the book is how she comes to faith when she meets her husband. And there's this really strange mingling there of what does it mean to be, what does it mean to be myself? And then what does it mean to be a woman of faith? And then also how is that tied into being married? And so much of, I think, why she stays with Samuel is because she was 17 when she met him, and she kind of doesn't, he made her life better than it was before. And she just, everything's so wrapped up, this idea of what does it mean if I walked away from Samuel, what am I walking away from? What do I not see? What's this life I don't have anymore? And that's, I think, what she has discovered over the course of the book. But she doesn't have, she takes steps to kind of act on her power, and then kind of take steps back, and is a woman who's pretty beaten down by life and by Samuel as well. She's a woman who has been abused and is being abused, and Miriam sees that, and Miriam loves her mom and wants her mom to want more. And Joanne, I think, is trying to figure that out for herself.
And speaking of Samuel, I was reading an interview that you did talking about kind of the challenges of writing a character like that, who is a character that, you have a lot of issues with Samuel, and yet you want to make him well-rounded. You want to make him realistic, and someone that Miriam admires at one point. So can you talk about sort of the difficulties or the challenges of navigating writing a character like that?
Sure. Yeah, Samuel was a challenge from really early on, because in my head, he's bad, but no one's all bad, right? No one's all bad, no one's all good. And I think to make him more compelling, I had to have moments where he felt like he could be redeemed. And so I couldn't make him this villain. It's also not interesting to read this very one-dimensional villain who is only awful to his daughter and his wife, but is, in other ways, it's like he has to have something redeeming. And so he was hard for me, because I'm on Miriam's side. And so the idea that for me to kind of see the humanity in Samuel was a bit of a challenge. But as I revised, I had to work to make him more nuanced. I had to work to make him more sympathetic. Readers probably won't like him, but I hope that I've done enough to make him sympathetic, because I don't want him to just be completely written off. I mean, he's a victim of a larger structure that's put him in place in this way. And he is playing into power that's been given to him, and he's not questioning it, because people don't question power when it's given. They just sometimes just take it. And he is he is that. And so, but I did also want to make him a person who is pretty dangerous in this house and dangerous for the family. And so it was this tightrope consistently of, you know, wanting him to be real, wanting him to be nuanced and rounded, but then also knowing that there's a lot of stuff in him that I had to make, you know, inherently problematic so that it could make the tension to the book rise to the surface. Yeah.
And I do think one of the things that actually makes Samuel empathetic in moments is that you make his fear palpable. He's very afraid of losing a grip. And I found that to be very compelling. Now, on to the kids. We talked about Miriam. Caleb is sort of the heir of the family.
Yeah, Caleb is Miriam's younger brother. They're young. Caleb's about 10 months younger than Miriam. And so they're usually, they spend time at the same age. And he is the heir apparent. He is the next in line to assume what Reverend Horton kind of wants for this family summer revival circuit. And we don't know how much of that Caleb actually wants. And there's a scene toward the middle of the book where Miriam and Caleb, toward the end of the book actually, where Miriam and Caleb are outside and they're talking right before they go away to this final revival season that comes at the end of the book. And Miriam asks him what he wants to do. And she's surprised when she finds out that he is not, she's assumed that for this whole time, he's been groomed to become like his father and he has his own ideas, but he's also trapped too. And there are these ways that he feels like as someone who's the one son in this family until Joanne has Isaac, that kind of has this big mantle and there's a lot placed on him and he feels the burden of that. He also wants to believe in his father too. And he has more tenderness with his father than Miriam does. His father kind of takes him into the study and works with him and prays with him and does stuff that he doesn't do with Miriam. And so Caleb wants to see more from his dad. And he even has to start to break away because he sees how bad things are. So Caleb is a kid who I think wants more for himself, but doesn't quite know how to express it, but then also has a lot of expectation placed on him in a way that Miriam doesn't. Miriam's father does not expect her to be anything but subservient and dutiful. And, but there's a lot of expectations on Caleb and he wrestles against some of those.
Right. And then finally, I mean, we won't talk about the newborn baby because the newborn doesn't have personality, it's brand new. Hannah, another daughter in the family, has cerebral palsy, which is treated with such tenderness in this book. I'd love to talk about Hannah's role in the novel and also the research. We'll segue into the research question and about the research you did about cerebral palsy and the physicality of it, the way that you sort of describe, her physical body and movement and those things.
Yeah, so Hannah is the youngest, and she is what Hannah I think does for this family is, number one, and I say this early on, is she is this, if a family with a healer, to have a daughter like Hannah, he sees that all like in his face all the time as this thing that he couldn't heal Hannah. And there are moments earlier that Miriam remembers when he tries to heal Hannah and seems like he's unable to. So Hannah is a reminder always of the limits of Samuel's power. And I did a ton of research about cerebral palsy, and in particular, the types of, the kind of ranges from kind of severe and mild to moderate. And for Hannah, I wanted her to be nonverbal but I also wanted her to be emotive and to have responses and reactions. And she feels everything that's happening in that house. And so I wanted her to be not only this character who is kind of absorbing all this, absorbing the violence, absorbing what she sees, absorbing the pain in this house, but she's the one who can't comment on it. But also what Hannah does is, the book is about healing in lots of ways, and the early chapters are about Miriam spending this tender time with Hannah, where Miriam is doing all the work of, I mean, she's bathing Hannah, she's getting her dressed, she's taking care of her, and she's really maternal with Hannah. And in lots of ways for me, that's the healing in the book, but it's overlooked because it's not seen as something, it's seen as this domestic thing and no one would ever see that. But Miriam, the way that Miriam treats Hannah in the beginning of the book is with this reverence and this love and this devotion that I think the reader sees that doesn't come from her father, but comes from her sister. And so Hannah was the conduit for kind of me to do that in the book. And then, intense research on the types and the ways, like for Hannah, for example, by the time that she's in the book right now, she has crutches as opposed to being in a wheelchair. And so the ways that, but then they told her that she'll never be able to walk, which actually plays into a scene that takes place later in the book. I'm not going to give that away. And so this idea of kind of what it means to be healed and what it means to be whole in this family, and what it means to take care of each other and to kind of take care of one another. And Miriam does that for Hannah all the way through.
Yeah. And on the note of research, there are many wonderful scenes that take place in the revival scenes, the faith healing scenes. What was the research like for that? Had you attended any services that are like that?
Yeah, so the research was, there are a few parts. Number one, yes, not a ton, but I have attended both revivals as well as other types of church services where they practice faith healing, and they practice the idea of kind of what they'll call laying on of hands. And so I've been to those. And so those scenes were directly from my experiences in those services. And then, to make sure that I wasn't either remembering incorrectly, because it's been a while since I've attended, a service like that. I just did a lot of research to see, okay, what does this look like? How is it used? What do people do? What are the cadences, the things that people say? What are the refrains? One of the things in the book is Miriam remembers what her father says. She remembers his refrain and his cadence. And so there are words that he uses. So I wanted that to be part of it as well. And then so the revival part as well came from, I did a lot of research about how revivals are used differently in denominations. And this is a Baptist denomination. And so revivals are different than Methodists have revivals, and Pentecostals have revivals, and Charismatics have revivals. And so I did research about the specifics of a Baptist revival, the order of service, the ways, like what kind of happens in a revival service. And I kind of combined that with what I knew to put together these revivals. The thing that's interesting, and one of the things I've heard a bunch about the book, is that it feels a little bit like a throwback. The family does not feel, they do not feel like a modern family. They're separated and isolated from so many conveniences or so many parts of what feels like modern life, because they don't watch TV. They don't participate in that kind of life. They're sheltered. So I wanted the revival to feel like this throwback to an older thing that happened. And they still happen in this country a lot, particularly in the South, which is why I set the book there. But I wanted the revival to also feel like this, there's not a ton of technology. It's just this tent and this stage and this performance and what's happening in those moments. And so I wanted that to feel, I wanted those to feel really rich and dramatic, but I also wanted them to feel very kind of a little old timey and a little bit like a throwback to the past. And so I did a lot of research on what revivals were like in the past and kind of tried to place the Hortons in that context.
And the thing that I found so interesting about these scenes, and I'm going to get a little nerdy and writerly right now and ask about like your approach to making the scenes feel this way, is that they both felt like every moment is so precisely described that time sort of slows down, and yet there's a tension and suspense that is throbbing through them. So it feels both slow and fast and tense and all of those things. And there are several of these scenes in there. And I was wondering if you had an idea going in of what you wanted those scenes to feel like, or if you had an approach to writing those scenes, because they are very pivotal, every one of them.
I think that those scenes for me, and I love, if I could do anything all day, I would just write scene, and I wouldn't, there would be no summary, there'd be whatever. I just like happily live in scene and just describe a bunch of stuff, but then plot doesn't happen. That's my happy place. And for me, those scenes, in a lot of cases with Karina, I overwrote them. And so just to be very clear, a lot of them are significantly longer than they ended up being in the book. And I had to get them edited down to make them people not lose attention and focus, because that's a thing that I do. I had lots of details and I had lots of things that may not be interesting to anyone besides me. So some of them are really overwritten. But I did want to kind of keep this idea of what it feels like to be like this time standing, this moment of you're outside, it's a tent, it's hot. And I'm suspending time in some ways where, there's a scene at the beginning of the book where the father, at the beginning of the first revival season, the father, there's a young boy who's like Hannah, who is unable to walk, who comes up to the stage for healing. And I draw that out a bunch just because there's so much in those moments of, is he gonna do it? What's gonna happen? What is everyone thinking and feeling? And there's also so much happening around that moment. And so it's not just him on the stage, it is what's happening with the people sitting in the chairs next to you, what's coming into the tent. So I try to capture all that. And so I do try to keep some of the tension there, and I tried to slow it down because it mattered to me and because I love detail too much. So I'll talk about a mosquito and no one wants to hear about a mosquito, but or the way the lights sound. But so with some revision, I was able to get that to a really good place. I cut a lot of those down, but I love the idea of suspending time, of these moments of, are they gonna walk? Is he gonna talk? Is this person gonna do those things? And so in those tense moments, I did really want to slow all the way down and get the reader feeling what that felt like to be in that moment, to be in that tent, to be on that stage, to be in that audience.
Oh, great. And your approach to storytelling and plot, did you know the full story before you started writing?
No.
So how did it unfold for you? What's your process? Because I'm terrible at outlining. I don't know if you outline at all, but
I outlined this book way too late. Plot. So I kind of knew, because I love scene. It's like, okay, I want to write this scene and this scene and this scene and this scene. I didn't quite know what was going to happen in the middle. I didn't know the things I knew were scene and how I wanted people to interact, and that I wanted to be about Miriam and a rise to power in some ways. Some of the other stuff came up, in revision, where I was told, you need to kind of make this more tense, or you need to kind of bring more, for example, at the beginning of the book, a lot of feedback I heard at Iowa, and then right after I got out of Iowa, was that it's a lot of description and detail, but it doesn't really, what's the point of all of it? And so I had to add some tension really early in. It's something that my editor told me early on, that you have to make some tension early on to kind of show that this revival matters. And so a lot of those extra parts of tension, those were added. So I knew the general arc of Miriam. I knew that I wanted this family. That family was also pretty clear from the beginning. In an early draft, Miriam doesn't even want to, I think there was like the first draft was really confused. There were a bunch of plot lines and they didn't all work out. And then I had to streamline and strip a lot of stuff back to just kind of focus on one clear arc. And the outlining portion, my editor told me in the second round of revisions, maybe the third, like, oh, have you outlined this? And I was like, I have not. I knew it in my head and I thought I could keep it, and I did not. And so I literally had to see, I put a big piece of, and how there are things you should do. And then you're like, yeah, but I kind of don't want to. And I'd gone so far. I did a chapter outline that was kind of really, I did it with Margot Livesey, and I did it, and it was really kind of a little bit sparse and vague. But then I had to sit down and say, okay, if I say this thing happens on this date, I had to put it up on a chart and make it all put together. And I was like, I've made some huge gaps in time. And so I had to fix a lot of that. So I think I will do that differently next time. But it was a lot of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I, made that 2 years before it actually happened. But the book revealed itself to me, events revealed themselves to me, even though I kind of knew that I wanted the story to be about Miriam. I didn't quite know what I wanted the story to be. And every time I would write, more things would become apparent.
And yet, Monica, doing an outline is great, but I'm sure there must have been some happy surprises that ended up in the finished product. And there's a journey of discovery as you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants.
Absolutely. And so that'll be the way I make myself feel better about it.
Yeah.
There were things I never would have imagined that happened in the book that I said, oh, I love this. There's a scene early on with what happens at the previous year's revival that I added with my editor. And I was like, oh, I really like that. Or scenes I added that show different moments, or what happens with why Samuel gets really upset. This kind of after the revival season circuit, that's a whole new thing. And so it kind of opened the book up for lots of different possibilities that I didn't anticipate, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a book that's about faith. It's also about gender bias, patriarchy. And the women of this book, they carry a lot of secrets between them.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that and why you wanted that to be the case?
Yeah, I think that when someone is silenced kind of continually, one learns to have secrets. And when one feels as though something of their identity, whether it's in this book, it's gender, if it's not validated, you learn to just kind of keep things to yourself. So for Joanne's character, there are things that, there are ways but then she'll tell some of her secrets to Miriam, right? So like she does have these moments where she tells Miriam things that she knows. There's a scene in there that I will not tell, but Miriam finds out one of Joanne's secrets later on in the book that no one else knows about, and she kind of keeps her mom's secret in that specific way. But they don't feel safe to share them, and they don't feel safe to be who they fully are. And Miriam does not feel safe to heal without in the eyes of her father. She does not feel safe to be who she really is in all of its ways. And so she has secrets, and Joanne does too. And there's no escape valve for that. They just have to kind of keep these things and carry these burdens and do the things that make the house run and make the church run, and kind of get ignored in the background. Like this idea that, oh, well, everything happens, this is the way it should happen, but people make those things happen, but they're ignored. And so they retreat inward, and they retreat to a world where they aren't accountable to anyone, and they just kind of have a lot of secrets that they keep, and they're really burdened by the secrets. And apart from Miriam and her mom, and not even her mom the whole way, initially it's Micah, Miriam's best friend, but they keep secrets with each other as well. They're not Miriam's not telling Caleb her secret. She tells him some things, but she doesn't feel like he's going to see her all the way. She absolutely doesn't tell her dad anything. So
Yeah. Now, we talked about how you did a lot of research into the particular strain of faith that has the healing aspect of it. But I would love to talk about your personal relationship with faith, or with the organization that is the church, and how, if in any way, it informed your writing of this book.
Yeah. I think those two are interesting, separate. Those things feel separate to me, like personal journey of faith and then the relationship with the church sometimes feel really different. So faith to me feels really personal. I am someone who identifies as a person of faith, identify as Christian. I grew up Baptist, which is how Miriam and her family grow up, or how Miriam grows up. But I have real struggles with the church in lots of ways, with the organized church, what Ayanna Mathis would call the capital C church, and the ways that it excludes and harms and devalues in lots of ways. And that's hard for me. Faith to me personally is a place of peace and love, and it's a place of comfort for me. And sometimes it aligns with the church experience, and that feels really good, and sometimes it doesn't. And so the book came from a place for me of feeling like I've been to churches my whole life where women feel like second-class citizens, and the patriarchy of the church reinforcing this idea of what women can and can't do. And I struggled with that a lot for a fair amount of my upbringing. And this book is a way to kind of shine a light on all these women and girls who kind of do all the real work and are unseen and are and devalued and don't have power. And so my issues with that, Miriam is not me, but Miriam's issues I think are real, and Miriam's issues are my issues.
And I have just one more question before I think we turn it back over to Kathleen to get to the audience questions. But can we talk about this cover? Because let me tell you, when I got my galley, so this is the real finished, beautiful version. The galley was too. If you cannot tell, it literally sparkles. So as if the story inside isn't gorgeous enough, the cover of this book sparkles. I'd love to hear about the journey to this image of the tent. You know, it was the image of the van that captured your imagination first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious how we settled on this image of this huge sky, this tent, the sparkle, all of it.
So I got an email back in, I think it was September, from my editor saying, hey, we have these two, you know what the process of covers is like. You're not always, I sent an email earlier saying, here's some covers I think are interesting. Here's what I think I would love the cover to look like. And then Karina went into meetings and, you know, comes back with these two images. And she says, okay, there's a cover in here, and I'm not going to tell you which one we all like the best, but there are two. And one was a very dark night image with kind of string lights on top. It almost seems like the image behind the tent after what the scene of violence at the beginning of the revival. And it was a fine cover. And I saw that one first, I said, okay. And then I saw this one, and that was it. I mean, it took my breath completely away. And so I got so lucky with this cover. I didn't even know it was going to sparkle, because when you see it in a regular two-dimensional image, I mean, it was incredible. So there were no debates, there was no fighting, there was no nothing, there was no me advocating for anything. This cover was the second one I pulled up an email. Wow. And I almost stopped breathing.
Oh, that's kind of rare from what I understand.
Yeah.
I also had kind of a quick process, but I've heard that is very rare. And this cover just expresses, I mean, it says Texas with a big sky.
Yeah.
You know, it instantly you get like, you know, the faith, the healing tent, like all of it. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I could not. This cover is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. It's my book, so I feel really grateful.
They did that. Yes.
They did that cover.
You did that with this book. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dawnie. Thank you so much.
I will pass it to Kathleen. I see there's lots of questions in the Q&A.
There's a lot of questions, but we also have a lot of people watching on Facebook. So I'm looking at the Facebook end. So if you see me looking down a lot, I'm reading both the Facebook and the other questions. Well, I just wanted to say before we start, Monica, congratulations.
Thank you.
I am so happy to be a part of your journey, and it feels really special to be here launching your book with you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
There's a really great message that I have to read. It's from your mom and dad, and I've been looking at it, and your mom wrote, "We are so proud of you, baby girl." So, I mean, when the minute I saw that popped up, I almost interrupted everything to pop in and tell you what your mom and dad said.
I'm not going to cry.
Oh, I know. So I also wanted to let everybody know that Monica is going to come by the store and personalize copies, so you can buy them online, and Mike will put it into the chat. So we'll go with the first question. It's from Deshaun Winslow, and it's, now that revival season is out in the world, is there a chance that you might return to the first novel toward bringing it out to us?
So Deshaun is Dawnie and I's classmate at Iowa. And hi, Deshaun. Thanks for logging in. I think that, did you? No, he didn't. People who were in my Dawnie's group, like, so my second semester, my second year, I workshopped the first novel. Because I workshopped revival season for 3 semesters and then workshopped the other novel for my last semester. I don't know. I don't know if my energy, I don't know. I'm working on something new that's not that one. And I'm not saying it'll never see the light of day. I just feel my energy feels elsewhere. And I sometimes think, I wonder if that's a novel that I just learned how to write with. Like I learned how to write on that novel and then I wrote this one. I may go back to it, but everyone has this experience, whether you write a paper, if it's my students, where you look back at something that you wrote a long time ago and you said, this is the most terrible thing I've ever written down. And so that's the anxiety I feel when I reopen that old draft that I started 19 years ago. And so it feels so like my life feels different. The writing thing feels different. So I may go back to it. I may not. It depends on where my energy is. It needs so much work. So I'm not sure.
But I will say there was so much wonderful in it, Monica. And I still remember the scene of that girl's mama showing up at the school.
That's right.
In the principal's office. That's all I'll say. I'm not spoiling what it's about. I have faith.
We have another question from Yeshi Gusfield. And how do you decide on the names of your characters? Which names were most meaningful to you?
It's a great question. Thanks, Yeshi. Yeshi is my coworker. She teaches at the high school with me. And the one that was most meaningful to me was Miriam's name, because Miriam is Moses' sister, and she's this overlooked, and it's a story that comes up in the book, and this idea of Miriam as a namesake and Miriam as a character, and letting that be a thread that came all the way through. So that's something that the names all meant something, Miriam, and then Miriam names her brother Isaac at the end. And that's a scene of naming that I kind of call a lot of attention to. Everyone has biblical names in the book except for Joanne. And I think that hints back to Joanne's secular upbringing. And even though Samuel was as well, but in that way, even with her name, she's a little bit of an outsider of the family. But Miriam's name for me was, they're all biblical, but Miriam's name for me felt like the one I kind of, it came to me right away. I said, oh, this is perfect. This is this idea of kind of a sibling who is overshadowed by a sibling. And then Miriam's name kind of felt like it was exactly right for that.
So I'm going to flip over to Facebook, and our own Sarah Hines Stevens is asking. She says she loves both of you, by the way. She works at the store. And she said, Monica, did you get pushback about the ambiguous ending?
Yes. Yes. And I knew, okay, so that people are mad at me about the ending. Yes, I recognize it. I'm sorry. And yet, I think that the ambiguity of the ending fits the book in some ways, because I think that one of the things I tried not to do in the book was to tell you what to think or what to believe. So you can approach revival season and say, I'm skeptical of every single thing this man does, and you have that interpretation. That's fine. You can also come to it and say, I believe it. I believe in him. I believe in what he does. I think all this stuff is real. And I leave room for that. And so I think that at the end, where Miriam has to make a decision about what she's going to do, I wanted to I spend the whole book not telling you what to believe and think and be and feel. So the ending was for you, based on what you think happens in this book, what do you think is going to happen? And I know it's not going to feel right. I also know that the ending was the hardest part of this book for me to write. And I wrote, 15 of them. And I once heard one of my professors at Iowa said, when the ending's right, you'll feel it. And I didn't believe it. When I ended it, I felt it. And so it felt like it had to end that way, even if I know people are going to be mad at me for it.
So we have another question. This is just an anonymous attendee. What can people best do to help spread the word on this incredible book? Congratulations on the New York Times book review. How would Miss Walton suggest we show support for this incredible novel? So come on, Dawnie.
Spread the word on your social platforms. That's a really great way to help. And then just telling your friends about it. Making sure that you have bought your copy, preferably from an independent store, is very helpful. All those things are great. Yeah. Monica, you have anything to add to that?
I think also, even depending upon where you buy it, leave reviews. So leave reviews on Goodreads, leave reviews, even though maybe don't purchase from Amazon, but leave reviews on Amazon. Leave reviews of the book. And that just kind of helps people kind of see that people are reading it and liking it. So that's what I would add to what Dawnie said.
So I'm going to flip back to Facebook Live. Can you share some, this is from Gabby Avia Ryan, and she wants to know, can you share some of the challenges of telling your story from a 15-year-old's perspective for an adult audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Gabby is one of my closest friends. Yeah, I think that it was hard because there's such a tricky element of a young narrator than necessarily being YA and meaning that needs to be a YA audience. And I struggled with that, actually. I had a long process in a different iteration of this book where I didn't see eye to eye with an agent, and we parted ways because of that belief. I think that what I like about young narrators is that they are porous and open to the world in ways that I think adults close themselves off to. And so what I loved about writing a 15-year-old was that everything is kind of new, and it's discovery, and it's investigation, and it's all these things. And it's I think we all remember when we were 15, we didn't love all of it, but there's something about that age that is full of memory and full of hope and full of optimism, and also full of a lot of angst. And I think that even adults can relate to that. And so I tried to make Miriam really observant, even though she's 15, of the world this adult world that she kind of doesn't know if she wants to be a part of, but that she sees. And so I did my best to try to make her concerns adult concerns, even though she's not adult. She's talking about patriarchy and power and religion and oppression and gender equality. And those are things that are big issues, even though the person who's the mouthpiece for those issues is 15.
So we have another question. When did Ms. West find out that May 25th would be her publishing date? And it was the same date as the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. And does she have anything she might want to share about this?
Yeah, I did not. So my book publishing date changed twice. So initially the book publishing date was going to be May 4th. No, it changed 3 times. Initially it was going to be May 4th, and then COVID, and then June 15th. And then what just actually got announced, which is that Revival Season is the Barnes & Noble June Discover pick. And so the Discover New Authors pick. And so I had to push it back to the end of May. So I found out about that in February. And I knew that was going to be a day. I knew by February of 2021, I knew what May 25th meant. And so it's a day that's been really hard for me in some ways, because it's a day of intense joy and pride. And this is a thing I've been working on for 9 years, and I'm really grateful for that. And it's a day of immense kind of sorrow for this country and for George Floyd's life and for his legacy. I'm grateful that that my launch date comes after Derek Chauvin was convicted. It would be a really different, I think, thing. He still lost his life, but I think it would be a different conversation or a different feeling about it had Chauvin been exonerated. So I'm carrying all these emotions about the state of this country, the state of race relations in this country, and also being excited about something that's personal happening for me. So it's been a really tricky, I can't answer that in a way that, it's been a really tricky line to cross and walk. And there's immense grief and suffering, and I know that. And even on a day that's really joyous for me. So that's kind of what I would say about that.
So we have another question. Could we find out more about how Ms. West chose these topics? Has she been in touch with women and children with whom she grew up, and what might they think?
Chose the topic for this book. Yeah, so the book came from this idea of me wanting to write about, well, me thinking about what's something that I struggle with, and what's a place of power, this inequity, and then deciding to write about the church. And but it's not, so in the sense of, it's not nonfiction. So it's everybody in this book is made up. No one in this book, these are not my parents. I'm not Miriam. I'm a sister and a daughter, and that might be it. And then Miriam's concerns about the church are mine, but the rest of it's fiction. So that's where the book came from. And what's been really lovely about being in touch with people I went to school with, if that's the part of the question, is I've gotten so much love today and this whole journey from people that I have not seen in years. I grew up in Ohio, and high school friends and middle school friends, and everybody's been reaching out and showing me copies of their book, and that's been amazing and lovely. So I've gotten a lot of support from them, and yeah, but I wasn't writing about them, and I wasn't writing about people that I grew up with. I kind of felt like I was speaking for people who I know exist, even if I don't know them personally.
So we have a question from Reggie Bailey. Early in the event, Dawnie mentioned how you were both older during your time at Iowa. Do the both of you feel like that ultimately played to your advantage when it came to Opal and Neb and revival season?
I'll start. Dawnie and I, well, one thing that played into the fact is that when Dawnie arrived on Iowa, it's like, yep, we're going to be friends. I knew it right away. I mean, there are many reasons why I'm friends with Dawnie. And one of the reasons that she and I both know what it feels like to be, to go to a program like Iowa and be older and be, you know, I think that we'd lived and we'd worked and we'd quit our jobs and so there was a lot of sacrifice for us to go to Iowa. And so because of that, I felt like I worked. I'm not saying that, okay, what I'm not saying is that people who don't have the backgrounds that we have don't work hard. I'm saying that I had a drive to kind of like, I sacrificed a ton to be here. And I know what it's like to work, and I've had it, and I know what it feels like to not have time to write. And I spent my 2 years at Iowa writing all the time because I had a life outside of Iowa and I was teaching high school full-time English, which means I had no time. So I was grateful and I took advantage of that. So that helped me get a lot of stuff done. What about you, Dawnie?
All of that, everything you just said. I think it was too, I mean, you know, as you said, you know what it's like to not have that time. And so you become a lot more appreciative of it when you have it. And it's such a valuable experience when you're able to focus entirely on what has been your dream that you have waited so long to try to chase. And so you come in with that drive, you come in with that focus, and the little things that are annoying about the program or about Iowa, it's like, okay, but I have all this time. Like this is my dream. And you just are able to kind of sit in that a little bit better.
So we have a question from Christopher Shank. He wants to know, Monica, what is your preferred writing space or routine?
So Christopher Shank is a colleague of mine in the English department at Wilmerding High School. I write from my house, and a lot of people need public space or they need coffee shops or whatever to write. I write at home most of the time, all the time. I get a little too distracted. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm listening all the time and I'm watching what other people are doing. And so that to me would make me not focus that much on the thing I'm writing. So I kind of control the space that I have, and I'm, on my couch and I write. And my routine is usually, this past 4 years, since Iowa, I've been working part-time at Lick, and I teach every other day, and then I don't teach on the other days. And I make myself a goal. And the days I don't teach, I try to write 1,000 words a day. And sometimes that is an all-day feat. And sometimes that is something that takes me 3 hours and I kind of get it finished easily. On the days I teach, I try to write 500 words either before work or after. And that's easier for me than saying I want to write 7 hours, because if I do that, I can spend 7 hours on researching on the black hole of research for a novel and not write a word. So the word count keeps me accountable.
So we've got a question from Josiah Densby.
Mm-hmm.
Did you listen to Mahalia Jackson at all while writing this? And how do you decide on the characters' names? I think you already told us that.
Yeah. I've listened to Mahalia Jackson. Josiah is my one of my students. He's graduating. He's a senior. He's graduating on Saturday. And he's going to Howard in the fall. And so Josiah, I listen to Mahalia Jackson, but not when I was writing. I actually don't listen to music when I write. But I have heard Mahalia Jackson. I just didn't listen to it. Didn't listen to her while I was working on the book, because I don't listen to music while I'm writing generally.
So we've got a message on Facebook from Yaya Santos, who writes, Ms. West, I can't say this enough. Congratulations. Can't wait to read it. Karina Flores from your 4th grade class.
Oh, I taught 4th grade in 2000. Golly, how old was I? In 1990, I graduated from high school, I graduated from college, and I taught 4th grade years 2000, 2001. And Karina was my 4th grade student in 2001. So thank you for being here and showing up. And yeah, I taught you a very long time ago when you were 9 and now you're an adult.
So I'm gonna skip to the Kimberly page. Tell us about the moment that you knew it was the right time to focus on becoming a novelist and attend the program in Iowa.
I think that for me, the first person who actually told me that I should think about I wanted to get my MFA for a little while, and I'd applied and I got rejected. I got rejected from Iowa 3 times before I got in, and got rejected from other programs, got waitlisted. And so I was trying to do it. It wasn't meant to be. And on my final, but the reason, so that was kind of a while ago. I think my writing wasn't ready. And then I went to these summer conferences, and I went to one at Napa Valley College, the Napa Valley Writers Conference. And Peter Ho Davies was my instructor there. And this is in 2013 maybe. And he says to me, we had our conference after my book, after I just gotten the first chapter of revival season kind of done and a little bit dusted off. And he said, you should think about this as a field. And he was the first person, after kind of getting some rejections and like, I don't know, should I? And he was the first person who kind of said to me, professionally, you kind of owe it to yourself to take the time to do this. And so I said, okay, even though I'm older, and I just thought I would just write but not get an MFA. And I decided that I was gonna give it another shot. And I think the year after I was with Peter, I got rejected that year. Then the year I got in 2015. So yeah, I'm persistent. So that's how I got done.
So I'll take the next question. They want to know if we're going to do live readings at a Great Good Place for Books this summer. And I can honestly say, I don't think we will be. As you guys know, Monica knows, we're a very small store, and 6 feet apart would not go very well with. So we're hoping, we don't know what the fall's going to bring yet. So I thought I'd take that question. Because we don't have very much more time left. We've got a question from A. Wall at Lick Wilmerdine. What do you hope people will walk away from with this book?
That is my friend Angela, another English teacher at Lick. And I hope people walk away with, what I hope is that people can see a different way to exist within larger structures of patriarchy. And so for Miriam, what it means for her to step outside of what she's always known with her father. You don't have to be religious to read this book. You don't have to even believe anything to read this book, but I want you to think about how systems of power impact you and how you exist in relation to those. And the idea that what the thing that you've always grown up to believe and want doesn't have to be the thing that you end up being. And so I want people to kind of question things and to question power and question systems. I want women and girls to feel validated, especially in really patriarchal structures like the church. And I want people to kind of believe that you have agency and power, and you can kind of actualize that. That's what I kind of hope people walk away with.
So here's another question. It's not really a question. This person wants to know my view about how to promote this novel. And as Monica knows, I've been very busy on social media.
Yeah.
Incredibly busy. I am so proud of you, and I will promote you as much as I can. And they wanted to know when my glorious bookstore would be open. And I need to tell you, we are open for shopping. We're just not open for in-person events, which I don't think anyone in the country is yet. And let's see what else they have. Thank you, Monica. They wanted to thank you for your views on the launch date and having us be able to share your book on this awful day. It gives us a chance to think concretely about all the things we may want to change. We have sent Monica's book to so many today that gives us a chance to reach out, and we hope she knows she is making this possible. Oh,
Thank
they
you.
said that I didn't need to read it, but I did. So I want to say that Monica and I talked before we started this wonderful event, and she is planning to come to the store tomorrow afternoon, probably. Or is that one of your days off from school?
It is. Well, school's out, right? So
Okay.
yes.
I won't be until Thursday, so.
Okay.
But I would love to have you come sign books. And I need to tell you that Monica will sign every book. If you put in the comment section who you want it signed to, and it's really easy. Go to www.ggpbooks.com. And Dawnie, we have copies of your books for sale. They're on our favorite fiction table. And Mike's got it on his shelf, may I add, his staff pick shelf. So your book has a big life in our world.
Oh, thank you.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book.
Oh, thank you, Monica.
And you know, anything with music in it usually gets me. So so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thank everybody for coming. And Monica, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Even though we've never met in person, we've met online. I feel like I know you. And you teach at the world's best high school, which we were talking about before everybody came online.
That is true.
And Dawnie, I can't wait. I hope when the paperback comes out, we get to see you here in California and we can see you at a great good place for books. So once again, if you'd like to get a signed copy of the book, Monica is going to come by the store and sign. And you can order it online at www.ggpbooks.com. And we also ship. And I want to, I'm going to give you my big hand clap, Monica and Dawnie. What a wonderful evening. And I want to say thank you so much. We had so many people online and everything. I've been bouncing back and forth between the questions. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming and thank everybody else. And now, Monica, go celebrate.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much, Dawnie. Thank you, everybody who showed up. I really appreciate it. So
my pleasure.
We're so proud of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.